Hello, and welcome to another episode of No Notes, where the conversation is always a perfect 10 out of 10. This podcast is powered by Eleos Health, the most used and most loved AI platform in behavioral health, equipping more than 100 organizations and over 10,000 providers with powerful automation tools that streamline documentation, simplify compliance, and surface deep care insights that drive better client outcomes. I'm your host, Dr. Denny Morrison, and for today's episode, we are excited to be joined by Kate Benedetto, Customer Insights Manager at Eleos and former Manager of Enterprise Applications at Clinica Family Health and Wellness, and Christina Stewart, Training Lead at Eleos. Today, we'll chat about their experiences and observations on both sides of the AI implementation coin, including key internal strategies for success, common pitfalls, and what you might expect from your vendor as you embark on your AI journey. So welcome, Kate and Christina, and thank you so much for being here today.
Thank you.
Yeah, thanks for having us.
So just by way of introduction, tell us a little bit about yourselves. Christina, why don't you start? Tell us a little bit about kind of your background, how you came to Eleos, what you want to be when you grow up.
Yeah, absolutely. Happy to. So I've been with Eleos for I'm just shy of 2 years at this point. I stumbled into training and development. I've done a little bit of everything in my life. I've done sales. I've been in the outdoor industry. I worked in recruiting for a little bit. That's how I stumbled into healthcare training initially. I cut my teeth in EMR, EHR record training, did a bit of a requisite stint at Epic for a bit. And then 2 years ago, when the opportunity to join Eleos came up, there was the opportunity to build out another training program as well as be more face-to-face with providers, with clinicians out in the field. And that's where I really get my energy from. I thrive being face-to-face with providers. So it was a little bit of a no-brainer there. Also, I am married to a therapist. So the idea of being able to make her life a little bit easier at some point really spoke to me. So that's a little bit about me.
Great. Kate, tell us about you.
Sure. So my formal background is actually in forensic psychology. So that is what my master's degree is in. And I've been in behavioral health for, 20 years now. Spent the first half of that in more of like the direct care space. So lots of times doing that face-to-face work, lots of case management. I've worked on some crisis teams, worked in some very rural areas. So lots of experience writing notes, doing documentation, those pieces. Second half of the career, did a little bit of a career shift, did the whole burnout in clinical care thing, and decided to shift myself to started in quality assurance, and then kind of made this little pivot into IT when we were starting to roll out a new EHR, and have spent the last significant chunk of my career doing enterprise applications management. So really managing the EHR at an organization level, thinking about what we need to do with our individuals to make sure that they have a good experience at the org. Came to Eleos as a little bit of a surprise, had been partnering with Eleos for some time, doing kind of like customer testimonials, a lot of, the back and forth. Let me tell you everything that I think your product needs and all of my thoughts and opinions about this. And then joined Eleos actually in January of this year as Customer Insights Manager. So really excited. And I think part of my drive to be here was this. I know the pain points of being a therapist. I know how it is to be sacrificing your personal time, your personal space to be doing documentation, which you really don't care about, but that needs to get done so we get paid. So I really wanted to have this bigger impact of supporting people like me, who are the 9 o'clock note writers. So in my current role, I get to use a lot of that kind of behavioral health background to work with our customers to understand, what do you need from us? What kind of things do we need to help you with? What are your pain points? Tell me what's going on. Understanding the behavioral health landscape, there is so much changing at such a rapid rate right now. to understand where everything's going. How do we adapt to this? How do we flex with this? And then kind of relaying that back and working internally to make sure that we're developing a product that makes sense. So happy to be here.
Great. Well, you both have some really interesting backgrounds that come at this from multiple directions. When you folks look at the implementation side of this, Kate, what do you see as the biggest challenges when we're rolling out an application like this?
Oh, rolling out applications in general, I think, and I'm going to, kind of steer away from like the AI thing for a minute, but I think just rolling out applications in general at an organization level, the biggest challenge is hearing from staff, oh no, ugh, they're giving us another thing that we have to learn, and how is this actually going to help me? Chances are it's probably not going to help a whole lot. It might feel like a huge hindrance. So hearing that feedback and just kind of processing all of that and thinking like, okay, how can I create buy-in for somebody that doesn't want to use this right off the bat because they don't see the benefit to them? So I think that that's a huge challenge. So this perception of how you introduce new software to an organization, I mean, there's always going to be a funding challenge. Every time that you think about rolling out software, it's how do I pay for this now, but how do I pay for this down the road? So if I have something like grant funding, how do I make this sustainable down the road once that grant funding goes away? Even with the funding piece too, when rolling out and purchasing new software, I also feel like there's a bit of this justification of the spend. So in a space where staff are already feeling underpaid and probably undervalued in a lot of ways, and now we go out and we buy this software that we're telling you have to use, how am I going to frame that in a way where I can introduce some benefit to you? It's not going to make up for you being underpaid, but it is going to provide benefits to you in other ways. So kind of bridging that justification challenge. And then the thing that I always struggled with, and the thing that I struggled with rolling out something like Eleos, is in this AI space, you don't know what you don't know. There are so many questions. There are so many things to think about. And how do you know what questions to ask sometimes, because you don't know what to expect from something like AI? So kind of going through that hurdle of, okay, well, I'm going to have to figure out what I need to ask, but I'm not entirely sure what to ask or how to get to that place.
Yeah, it's been this seems like to me one of the first, if not the first, technology tool that really is geared at helping clinicians. I mean, we said that EHRs were going to do that, and they didn't. They actually made their jobs harder. Now, there were benefits to EHRs, of course, but they didn't accrue to the clinician who had to interact with the EHRs. So, Christine, what about you? What do you see as being kind of like the common misconceptions that people have about AI and Eleos specifically?
Yeah. I think some of the common misconceptions that we see, and Kate, I really appreciate that from your side, you were saying that like you were looking for buy-in ahead of time, right? Because we're looking for buy-in during the training too, right? I think a lot of times folks think that maybe we're just going to come in and train people and just walk in and be like, okay, here's like an EHR training, maybe, right? Here's your software. Good luck. and we're not going to offer any support afterward. And goodbye. And we don't necessarily care about your experience, right? We do very much care about everything going into the training, right? As well as support afterward, right? So we want to hear about the end user's experience. We're still at a point where we very much can make changes within the product, and that's Kate, your role is to hear user feedback, right? And we as the training team are directly on the front lines of hearing users as they get to put their hands on it first time, as to what their experience is. I think one of the other misconceptions is that we aren't willing to partner on what content is, or we don't know like the behavioral health business, right? We don't know what notes look like. We don't know like what a case manager does versus a therapist does versus a peer support, because there are so many different roles within these organizations that we work with. And we know that training can't be a one size fits all for our organizations that we partner with, right? And when we come in, we're not just like, here's how you write a note and like, again, good luck and goodbye, right? We try to make the training relevant for the learners because, I mean, I'm sure we've all been to some pretty like terrible trainings in our lives and done some pretty terrible, asynchronous trainings in our learning management systems. If it's not relevant, you sit there and you click through it, or you zone out and you do whatever else on your computer. But if it's actually relevant to your job and the notes that you write, one, you're engaged and you can actually get buy-in from the providers that you bought this product for. But two, we want them to be able to use it. We want them to be able to see value from it. That said, I mean, my favorite joke is always going to be that your billing department's always right. Like I'm always going to defer to the billing department and whatever they tell, because I don't know your business as well as you know your business, obviously, but we do know some things and how to help make it relevant for the providers.
Yeah, as opposed to some vendors that will come in and, like you said, it's like, here's the training. Good luck. See you around. It can be more interactive. Do you guys still see, though, the lack of trust in AI generally? Is that you have to dispel early on, or is that kind of fallen by the wayside? Because it seems like clinicians and organizations are a lot more sophisticated today than they were even 4 years ago about AI. But what do you see? I mean, do people still kind of, oh my God, it's AI. It's going to, every bad science fiction movie I ever saw now comes to mind. Kate, what do you see?
I think it's very person specific and it's very org specific. I think that there's still a perception out there that AI is meant to replace, and that is absolutely not what we are here to do. We're here to support, and making sure that that is super clear is absolutely paramount. So I think there's individuals, and it's on that level of how do you personally feel about AI? How do you use it in your daily life? And then from an organizational level, it's again, there's organizations that are going to be extremely tech forward. They want to be known as an innovative, change embracing organization, and they are going to leverage AI and want to leverage AI in ways that are going to help them to create efficiencies and to really demonstrate if you're looking for that tech strategic innovation, come to us. And then there are organizations that, based on maybe how they started or maybe something about their leadership, they're just not quite at that point of embracing AI yet. And it feels very overwhelming. They may not have, considered where their current gaps are that AI could support them with. They may just not know a lot about AI, and they may frankly not have time to research how AI could be helping them as well.
And to build off that, I would say that it's interesting too from the end user's perspective, the provider's perspective. There are users who are hesitant to use the tech because they don't know anything about AI and they're worried about it. And then there are users who are hesitant because they know a lot about tech, and then they're worried about it because they want to know if everything's encrypted on the way up and on the way down. And we have to address both sides of the objections, right? And the worries really is what it is that folks have when they come into training. We do training surveys ahead of time so that we actually hear what folks are worried about before they come to training, just kind of pulse checks ahead of time. Then obviously, once we know where people are at kind of on the spectrum of those like worries that they have, we talk about it directly. If you dodge anything, people feel that, right? So when we talk about it directly to them, generally it helps. Then we gain a little bit of their trust, and comes back to the buy-in aspect, right, Kate? It's just, again, kind of folks are at where they're at, and it's our job to meet them where they are, as part of the training function.
Interesting. I mean, you go in and you start off with an audience that's, let's just say, generally receptive, but may or may not be excited. And how does that compare to organizations' attitudes, say 6 months in after they've already started using Eleos, or a year in? Well, how do you see the attitudes of the end users changing from first contact to a year later?
Okay, so there was an organization where I did their first training in June. This was actually one of my first trainings. I did their first training in June of 2023. So this was a while ago. And I was back in December of 2023 doing like a big rollout of like 300 users. And so I was back in their head office, and we were finishing up a training, and one of their therapists popped in to the office, and she was like, "Oh my goodness, I just have to tell you, every time I use the little note taker, right? My desk is, by the way, littered with all of our note takers, right? Every time I use the little note taker, it reminds me of something that I did in session that I didn't even remember that I do, right? Or I don't give myself credit for all of these things that I really should be giving myself credit for." That was the effect of it in action, right? Because it was almost 6 months to the day of seeing the effect of like the happiness for that particular therapist of that in action. And this is a really a joy as a trainer who gets to go to do it and train the end users on a regular basis, right? We get to see users get trained, and again, sometimes they're not super pumped, right? Because again, you're having to just go to another training. Sometimes they're being told by their organization they have to use something, and we try to make it as interesting as possible, but again, you're told you have to go to a training. I being a training manager, don't love having to go to training sometimes, right? But you go to a training, and until you get to see the benefit of what it does to your life, right? And the time saved, or like just getting to watch Netflix at night instead of having to document in front of Netflix, right? You don't necessarily make the connections of the long-term benefits of what it might do for you until you see it. And we get to hear about those real life stories, especially when we either go back or talk to the end users after time. And that's, I mean, one, that's why we do it, but two, it is really delightful to read the feedback, to see it happen.
You actually lived through that. What was that like at your place?
I think the best thing, not even 6 months down the road, one of my favorite things was after our first small group that we rolled that out to, we had a couple of the clinicians that just ran back to their office like, "Hey, I was practicing with my fellow clinicians, or I used this for my session," within an hour of the training. That just doesn't happen a lot with software. When you are told, "Okay, here's this thing that I'm going to give you to use," it doesn't happen that way. And I also had another person who sent me an email about a week later, and it was this, "Kate, I was so skeptical, and I got to be honest, I didn't want to use this. I didn't want to use this. I went into this with this mindset, I'm not going to like this, I don't want to do it," to "Please don't ever take this away from me." Like, okay, that's a pretty significant shift. And we're a week into this, and I love this, and I love this feedback because clearly it's making a difference.
One of my favorites, I think, was please don't take the little note taker away from me. In the feedback that we got, I was like, this is great.
I honestly, I've been in this business a while. I don't think I've ever heard anybody say that about an EHR.
No.
It's like, this one isn't as bad as the other one, but it's not
Right.
like, oh my God, this is life-changing.
Everyone's favorite EHR is their friend's EHR.
Yeah. The grass is
Love
greener. Hey, so when you're doing training or implementations, like what are like some of the toughest questions you get from staff about these technologies?
There were a lot of questions around data privacy. So knowing that that was such a visible piece to them, that they are wondering, how is this data stored? Where is this data going? What are you doing with my data? How do I explain to clients where this data is going? Is this safe? A lot of those privacy questions that was so refreshing to hear that staff are thinking about, but it's also a very challenging place to have to explain to that. Thankfully, I wasn't the person that had to do the explanation at that point. It was our wonderful trainer who was doing all the explanation about where those were going. Shout out to Larry on that one. But there were a lot of those questions coming up. There were a lot of questions around, and I know that this is one that comes up frequently. Do we need people to sign something for this? Do we need to have clients sign a release? How do we make a determination if we're going to have people sign a release? Where does that factor in? And then how do we monitor some of these things? So a lot of it really was, at least for that kind of first group of individuals, tied a lot to data, privacy, client protection, and how we address that as an organization, and that at the individual level, how to explain this to my clients, like this thing is going to sit here and it's going to listen to us and it's going to produce an output, which then I'm going to put into a note for, revenue or for that billing submission piece. A little bit of that, how does it work?
I think a lot of people don't understand, or maybe never thought about, but we actually train clinicians on how to talk about that. It's like, here's, as opposed to saying, well, it's kind of like up to your personal ethics. See ya. I mean, it's really, there is a way to do this that's best practice, and we help people with that.
Yeah.
So, Christina, how about you? What's been some of the toughest things you've had to encounter?
The toughest question that I think I've ever that we get on top of what Kate already said would be, are you looking to replace me? I try to head that off before we even get there, because that's never our goal. It's never going to be our goal as an organization. I'm married to a therapist. We would never want to replace behavioral health providers, right? The ultimate goal of our org is to make their lives easier and to prevent providers from burning out of the field, like Kate. Right? So exactly. So, but that is the toughest question, right? Because people ultimately they come into the training scared. So we have to go into the training, like the number one thing that we talk about when we go into like bringing on new trainers is you have to go into the training from a place of empathy, because if you're not meeting the providers, knowing that they are scared that we're coming in trying to like take their jobs, then like we're not meeting them where they're at. And again, that's the theme of what I talk about, right? Is meeting them where they're at.
Yep. So, when you, there's lots of factors that kind of contribute to a good implementation versus one that's rocky. And, as a former CEO, one of the things I'm always interested in is what is the unique role of leadership, senior leadership, in these kind of implementing these kind of technologies. So like, what is it that senior leadership can do to make that implementation process easier, faster, kind of grease it a little bit in anticipation of you guys coming in?
I can go first. It's change management, change management, change management. There have been times, right, where we've shown up on site and providers didn't even know what kind of training they were coming into. They didn't know it was an AI software. They didn't know that it was going to help them take notes. And we're already behind at that point, right? Because then you got to win them over twice. And then I probably got to buy them lunch twice, right? So I think really it's getting the providers on your side, but also like the leadership can do so much leading up to the training and the implementation just by prepping the providers and letting them know that this is coming down the pipe, that they are behind the software, but also that like letting them know the goals of what bringing this software on is, right? Like, is it to stop them from burning out, to help them hit their productivity goals? Is it to increase productivity? Hopefully not, but like we'll see, right? All of these things to let them know what the expectations are, because once they know what leadership's expectations are, things become a lot less scary. And then we are set up for success, bringing them a new tool.
Expectations management is key to a lot of this stuff. Kate, you're nodding your head.
Yeah, Christina, you touched on two huge things that always come to mind. I mean, around the change management, the first thing I always think about is words matter and words have impact. It is entirely about how you as leadership are framing this to your staff. If you are using words that are going to create anxiety or create chaos, it's just going to set a tone that you don't want to have for that implementation. And it's going to set you up for lack of success in a lot of ways. So really thinking about how you message this. Did you choose a word that has positivity to it, that is going to give people confidence in what we're trying to do here? And the other, I mean, you've both touched on this now, this idea around expectations and expectations at so many levels and being transparent about those expectations. And did you clearly define what problem are you trying to solve by implementing this piece of technology? Are you clear about the expectations for this problem that this solution is going to offer? Because if your expectations, if you say it's problem A and the solution is going to deliver on, expectation F, there is a huge misalignment right there. And it's not going to work out. There's staff that are going to be, I don't want to say mandated, but staff that are going to be required to use this. Are you requiring this of everybody? Are you giving this as a voluntary thing? And are you setting that up in the right way? So it's making sure that people know, like, okay, going into this training, this is something I have to use, or this is like a nice to use.
Yeah, I think I remember when we went live on our first EHR, I kind of, the way I conceptualized it was we had to make a very clear description of this train is now heading north. North kind of looks like this. Everybody's going to be using an EHR because we were going from paper, but it's like the job of leadership is to kind of set those expectations correctly and reasonably. And I think that's I really do think that's kind of like one of the key jobs of leadership. You don't have to get into the bits and bytes of it, but you do have to say, here's where we're going and here's why. And we think this is going to be important. So I think the expectations management of that part is important. And I don't know if you guys have experienced this. I think it's really helpful particularly if the CEO is present for that first kickoff meeting, that their presence says a lot about that. And they don't have to be there for the whole thing and they don't have to sit through the whole thing, but it's one of those intangible benefits of kind of what leadership can do without saying a word. They can just be present. So, hey, we are running out of time. But one last question, kind of briefly, what Where do you see the role of AI evolving in behavioral health care in the future? Where do you think it's going to go?
It's a really interesting question. And I think part of the reason it's so interesting right now is we are in such unprecedented times when it comes to behavioral health. There is a rapid rate of change happening at a federal administration level, and the impacts are kind of coming like from every single angle. And thinking about as these impacts continue to come in, what does that mean? What does that mean for behavioral health? What does that mean for an organization? So I think where I'm hoping AI is going to go is addressing some of these gaps that may start coming up as some of these federal changes and government, local, state government changes also keep coming. Is how do we use AI to continue to create efficiencies, to continue to support individuals that are doing this kind of work? What kind of things can be augmented through AI so the people that are doing the work can focus on the work that they need to be doing rather than these kind of administrative tasks that are taking up time, frankly, and could be done by something else.
I mean, it's kind of a continuation of what we're doing now, and that is getting clinicians to do what only clinicians can do and kind of get the junk off their desks and kind of get some other way to do that. Well, with that, I want to thank you both for this. This has been we've gone much longer than I expected, and I want to thank you for being here today. So we are going to sign off, and thank you very much.
Thank you. Appreciate it.